as well. If you're working in a silo, you don't comment your code. It doesn't really matter as long as you know what it does. It's fine. You can name your variables and your methods like whatever you want as long as you know what it is. It's bad practice. But as soon as you get another person that you need to share with source control your code with, yeah, then you need to obviously start taking it a lot more seriously and naming things and decide on a standard. And again,
Hmm.
because I'm self-taught, I I don't really know the best sort of coding practices, and from what I have learned, everyone does it differently anyway. There isn't a standard, even though there should be. Um, each studio will have their own sort of like coding sort of guidelines and style guides that you have to follow. Um, so as soon as you bring one other person on board, that's when you need to start being sort of serious.
Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, Carla Duke, and today I'm joined by Daniel Postlethwaite. Daniel is the product marketing manager for Slug Disco and creative Unity tutorials on YouTube over at Dan Pos. Today, we'll be talking about his career into games marketing, his indie dev journey, gaining insight into his tutorials, and what lessons he has learned along the way. A big thank you to Prismatic Studios for being our Season 6 sponsor, more on them later, but for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. All right, welcome Dan to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yep.
Yeah,
Excited to get chatting.
this is cool because this podcast, well, just me personally, I've started going down this journey of interviewing other kind of YouTube game dev tutorial makers, and I think the community is quite small. I feel like everyone kind of knows everyone, which is really
Yeah.
cool, and yeah, so you're just someone else that's come across my radar, and I think your content's great. I think it's really valuable for the community, and I think the Zero to Play audience will find value in this conversation as well. And what's awesome is that you do your tutorials, but you also have industry experience, and you kind of know what that balance is like, which sometimes I try and describe on the podcast with someone that's just got one angle. But I feel like you having both sides is going to be a great perspective that we can talk about today.
Yeah. That's it is quite interesting because obviously my industry experience is all market like it's marketing. So all the programming and Unity stuff, that's all sort of self-taught, kind of in my own time on YouTube. So
Yeah, so just to get us kicked off, for those that don't know what a product marketing manager does, do you mind just explaining that?
well, I mean, the title kind of says it all. I manage the product marketing. So the company I work for, it's a company called Slug Disco. We're an indie studio. And there's about seven of us at the minute. A couple of interns and then like full-time staff as well. Um, so as well as developing a game in-house, we also have a few publishing projects as well. So that's kind of why I got brought on board because obviously we have four games kind of under the Slug Disco umbrella, essentially. So um, for the guys who are working on Empires of the Undergrowth, which is their main title, which we develop in house, they just couldn't, keep up on the marketing as they started to get more sort of publishing acquisitions.
Mhm.
Um, and we're more of a marketing publisher. We're not like a fully hands-on in development and production sort of side of things. We're just helping get the word out there about these games that we found cool. Um, so that covers events, digital stuff, so social media, um, like yeah, in-person events, YouTube videos, sort of TikTok's kind of the next frontier of video games. So we're trying to crack that. Some
Yeah.
successes, some not so yeah, not successful in some instances. Um, but yeah, just doing kind of a bit of everything across all of the products, just making sure we can try and get the wish lists and sales up.
Yeah, so from my kind of my little experience that I've had in the industry, I never really heard the word product being floated around. I felt like that was more maybe like software, a term that was used more in software. But I guess, yeah, the fact that you just mentioned like events and social media and things like that, with that, the game is the product, and then there's all these kind of adjacent areas that are to benefit the product. Like, would you describe the game as the product, or how do you
Yeah,
describe that?
the game is exactly that. The game is the product. It's a commercial asset which you're selling, whether that's a physical game which you'd get on a shelf or just a digital Steam download. It's still product that you're exchanging with people for money.
Hmm.
Um, and I think you have to treat it as such across all of the marketing.
Mm.
Um, and
Yeah,
yeah, whether that's going out and meeting people face to face and doing those customer relations. My background in marketing isn't video games. I've not come up in video games. I've marketed in all sorts of weird different industries. So I'm coming to it with a bit more of a product kind of look on it as well. Yeah.
yeah. No, I think that's a good mindset for indie devs to have when they're making their games, because I think a lot of the time people just in this kind of consistent release mode, whereas thinking of something more as a product, you might change your strategy where you kind of try build hype up to a release and then see how that goes, and just like little mindset shifts like that might help an indie dev with kind of marketing their game that they're working on. Would you agree with that? It's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, definitely. If you take it to the extreme with the triple A's, you've got sort of like Fortnite at the top of the game. They're a live service game. The product there extends to actual physical merchandise, pop figures, stickers, books, or whatever.
Hmm.
Bedding in our local supermarket, and I think indie devs do need to kind of think of it like that. And you've got you know, there was three of them on the team who started developing the game that they do in house. Um, and when you're kind of focusing on that, like marketing is its whole huge kind of side thing. There's no point working on a game if no one knows about the game. Especially if you want to do it commercially, obviously. Some people, I know a lot of like YouTube devs, they're making money through YouTube and Patreon. They're less bothered about selling a game as opposed to just getting people excited about the game, and then
Hmm.
they've monetized themselves other ways.
Mm.
So in that
Yeah.
case, as an indie dev, like you are the product in that sense. But if you're an indie dev who wants to make money with the games, yeah, you do. I think you do need to think of it like that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to put it. That I see. I've mentioned Jonas Tyrola on the podcast before, but I like he really, I think, turned his game "Will You Snail" into a product and really pushed that. Um, Whereas, yeah, a lot of other game dev YouTubers, if you're doing like tutorials or things like that, you are the product, and that is an interesting distinction. I see people trying to still find themselves in that environment. Like they're not quite sure if they're trying to make a successful game or if they're trying to just be consistent and build the YouTube community. Where do you think you sit in terms of 50-50, or are you kind of just focused on, because I know you are working on some indie projects, this open world factory game that you've started promoting. Like
Yeah.
how do you balance that in terms of product for yourself?
Well, because I'm still kind of learning the programming, anything that I've made and put out. I think on my itch page, I've only published two games. I won't even call them games, just very small kind of prototypes. But um, the stuff that I'm doing and releasing, like on a personal level, they are just that kind of. I'm just trying to build up my kind of YouTube subscribers and showing stuff off. If something really kicks off and I get really into a game and I think it's going somewhere and there's interest, then it'd be amazing to obviously sell that and make some money. But I think that is quite, that's far off up the agenda. So, um, and that's all my side hobby as well. Like the product marketing manager, that's my full time job. So uh, it's kind of striking that balance. I think it'd be quite hard to make an indie game part time in any sort of reasonable time or scope. Um, I think I'd get burnt out way before completing like a big kind of full project.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting topic. Is how you manage to balance indie dev. I mean, you're balancing a full time job, indie dev, and then YouTube tutorials as well. How do you kind of manage that? Like, what's the kind of ranking from priority, and then obviously your life and your family and your health and all that. Like that has to play a part. What's your kind of breakdown of what's most important to least important?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the full time job's the thing that's paying the bills. It's paying the wages. Like I am making a little bit of money through YouTube and Patreon, but nowhere near enough to support me. Like if my job fell out from under me, I'd be kind of a bit lost. So
Mm,
that's definitely priority number one. But yeah, I work from home. It's a permanent sort of home schedule. It's not because of COVID or anything. It's just, we're all remote. So that kind of hour or two in the morning that I'd be spending commuting, I can, plan out my next video. On my lunch, I could then do a bit of programming and kind of scope out a video, and then in the commute time that I'm not coming home, I can still find that. So I'm very lucky, and I kind of know that I'm lucky, and not many people have that uh, sort of opportunity and the time to do that. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, and then I say under that YouTube, because obviously that's making a bit of extra money. Because my other hobby that's not in front of a computer is kayaking, and it's it's a very expensive hobby. So kind of every time I get a YouTube payout, I'm upgrading my kayaking gear. So it's not, that's just like my fun money.
Yeah.
Um, and then under that, kind of working on any personal projects. And I think that's why I've gone. You mentioned the open world sort of factory thing. I just wanted to do a very small, very low scoped, self contained kind of project that I could do devlogs on. And then that's kind of combining YouTube and making a game.
Yeah.
So I've just done a massive sort of inventory tutorial series, which is now at 16 videos, and it was
Hmm.
something like 10 hours total runtime. During that, I was building up this inventory system, which I've now got to plug into any game that I do want to make in the future. So it wasn't time wasted, but
Mm.
all of that time editing those videos and uploading them and responding to comments and helping people debug their projects. That is time consuming. So um,
Yeah,
that takes away
definitely.
from any sort of game development that I could do personally.
Yeah, it's cool that you've thought about, time not being wasted. I think that's really valuable. What I'm hearing though is your big game is going to be like a kayaking simulation game. That's what that's what I
Yeah.
feel would combine a lot of your
I
passion.
think that would be complete. I have messed around with a little kayak kind of type controller, and I had big plans for a little kayaking game, but I don't know. I don't know whether I want to involve my one hobby that's away from a computer and kind of commoditize it and turn it into something on the computer.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I am tempted. So it is a passion of mine, but yeah, it's a lot of anything water based anyway. It's too physicsy.
yeah,
That's why
yeah.
I didn't carry on with the project I was working on, because it felt awful to play.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. No, it's cool that you've thought about that though. Yeah. This is a question I had which kind of tags onto that, but how many indie projects have you given up on over the years? What
Oh,
have you often
far
dropped
too many.
things? Yeah.
You
What?
should, yeah. I think everyone who starts out, it's kind of, I'm at that stage now, having sort of self-taught myself, where I think going forward I've probably got the kind of confidence and skills to know exactly what I can do, or what I want to do. Whereas when you first start learning, like off and on, I've been trying to learn how to make games and programs since I was 16. I'm now 30. And I've never done really sort of specific chunks of time to that. But then obviously during the pandemic, we were on furlough. So I was just at home. And that's where I really put my time into kind of learning it. So I'm still quite new to all this. And as soon as you do your first kind of YouTube, like Udemy course in programming, you instantly want to go away and make the next Minecraft,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
just not going to happen. It's just you overscope it, you get really frustrated, nothing happens. Then you try and go on to your next project, and then that fails because you'd rather be making the previous one, and you think you're rubbish and that you can't do it. And then, it takes kind of a while. And that's kind of why I started to do YouTube. One, it helps like meet like-minded people, but it's helped solidify the stuff that I'm learning and then do it. And it kind of makes me focus on smaller chunks of content.
Mm.
Um, and kind of, I'm doing tutorials on things I want to learn how to make anyway. So I set out to learn, oh, how would I do an inventory system? I learned, and then I did a tutorial, and that solidified my knowledge and then passed it on as well. So
That's awesome. I feel like YouTube's a really great kind of bridge between, yeah, someone wanting to become an indie dev and then someone eventually, and then possibly making their career indie game development. And that YouTube bridge is great for, yeah, making content while you're learning and having some incentives along the way. Has that helped you? Do you think you would? Oh yeah, one question here I had is that you mentioned that if you weren't self-taught, you don't think you would have started a YouTube channel, and I think this is really interesting because you mentioned you wish you did a game design course at university instead of switching and doing creative writing. And one question I had is, do you think you'd have still pursued YouTube if you did study game development or game design more traditionally at uni or at school?
I do. It's hard, since kind of I've grown up in that generation where sort of I watch probably more YouTube than I watch television.
Yeah,
And I've had so many channels in the past that have just gone nowhere, from like the normal variety vloggers to travel vlogging to just
yeah,
all sorts of just random rubbish that I've put up. I don't know if I'd gone the other route and actually, because I did start on a game design course at uni, and then kind of it was very art focused, and I was more into the programming side. Um, and if I'd have stuck it out, they went on to all of the computer sort of side of stuff. But I was just kind of imposter syndrome. There's always really great artists around me, and I was just like, nah, I can't, I can't do this. So yeah, I jumped ship to creative writing, which helped me in my marketing career.
hmm
It's kind of gone full circle, now. But yeah, if I'd have stayed in that marketing, so the game design course, and then gone that route, I don't know. You hear from all of these kind of AAA studios that everyone's burnt out. There's no time. They've crunching and stuff. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I don't know if I'd have the mental capacity to do YouTube. It seems quite full on if you're actually a traditional game developer, as opposed to grassroots indie where you can kind of control exactly what you're doing and your time doing
Mm.
it. Um, it's
Now,
always hard, isn't it? Like thinking what could have been.
yeah, well, now with where you are in your career, with the skills you've developed in marketing, do you see yourself wanting to kind of have a experience at like AAA studio in like the marketing department? Is that one of your ambitions now?
No, I don't think so. I kind of I like the idea of a small team. And when I say small, I like up to like a few hundred. I just
Mm.
you kind of look at some of the numbers in the sort of big studios. It's like 10,000 people, and I know your like individual marketing team would be quite small, but um, yeah, I'm so used to working for small companies, and I really like that kind of you know underdog indie kind of stuff. Uh, I feel like I would prefer to stick the sort of smaller side of indie, maybe double A, not triple. I don't think I'd go full sort of triple A. Um,
Yeah.
never say never. If the right opportunity comes up, then yeah, I'd jump at it. But um, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
think so.
a term that I like is triple I, and I feel like we're in a time where there's the indie games are able to really crack that kind of mainstream layer, but still maintain a team of like 20 to 50 people, um, and
Yeah,
I
like,
think
it's
that's
like
quite
I don't know
interesting.
how. Yeah, I don't know how big like Devolver are, for example, but they're a big indie, and I
Mm,
kind of like that. Yeah, triple I is probably a good. Not heard that term before, but that's quite a good term. Yeah, the triple indie, like the so
yeah.
indie that it hurts.
Yeah, and especially like indie like there's a whole community of indie publishers and people that specialize in indie marketing and just how to crack it. There's the Ubisofts and the EAs and the games that have $500 million budgets, but then there's a huge community and network of people that are just focused on helping those indie projects, because I think there's been some incredible successes over the last decade, and I think it's only becoming more popular, with the tools and engines like Unity, with what you're able to achieve. Are you hopeful for what the future of game engines is going to look like for the average indie dev?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, Unreal Engine 5's just come out, and it's brought with it some massive improvements. But everyone, some of the most popular, like the two most popular videos on my YouTube channel are Unity versus Unreal, because it's such a
Yeah,
big kind of debate and topic. And I'll keep making those videos. People keep watching them. But what I say to people who comment is that, like, Unreal Engine 5 and Nanite and Lumen and all these big sort of techno and like mega scans, photo scanned assets. Um, they're great, but I can't see them working necessarily for an indie. And when I say indie, I mean, two or three solo devs. If you want to make a game in Unreal Engine 5 and use Nanite and Lumen to its full extent, and incorporate mega scans, if you want to make a fantasy game, what happens when you need a magical staff? That's not a photo scanned thing. But then if everything else in your game's photo scanned, you're going to need to know how to sculpt it perfectly and photorealistically to match. Otherwise, it'd look really weird out of place.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I'm not a massive fan of C++. I am trying to learn as well, but uh, and there's some good innovations coming to Unity. Um, but I think just as an indie sort of dev and from that side, yeah, I'm excited to see what Unity do to match Unreal Engine. They've bought Weta, they've bought some really big like Ziva, which is kind of like a metahuman type esque thing.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of comparisons, and they're chasing Unreal's tail, it seems. But it's the more approachable engine.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like we're going to see a lot of AAA quality looking environments and scenes, and then it's going to be like low poly characters with low poly assets navigating those lands.
I mean that's the thing. Unless you're doing like a walk-in simulator that's fully realistic, there's no fantastical element to it. And as Megascans grows, their library's getting bigger, kind of each day or whenever they update it. Maybe in the future, yeah, the whole world will be photo scanned and you could do anything. And there's obviously like kit bashing and stuff, but I think if you want to do anything sort of unique and slightly fantastical, even not fantasy but sci-fi or um, just horror or like just any sort of genre, you're probably going to need to make something handcrafted for that.
Mm,
I think it's going to be very unlikely that
mm,
Megascans, for example, will have that. So as soon as you start relying on those tools to build up your environments, like I said, everything needs to match that sort of standard of quality. And yeah, it's a very small. Like if you had a team of 20 and you had someone who was dedicated to doing that, fair enough. But as a small kind of, you see all these people starting out, they want to go learn Unreal because it's got blueprints and it's got all this fancy tech, but it's a bit too much for what you need as an indie, I feel.
yeah, definitely. It's an interesting time. I do wonder how Unity is going to compete, or if they're going to try and make like a different fit like a different niche in the community. They kind of already have with like mobile and things like that. If you had to give
Yeah.
if you had to list a third like most recommended game engine after Unity and Unreal, what would you suggest?
Well, I've only had minimal experience with it, but Godot is the next kind of big thing because obviously it's open source, it's completely free, no licensing. Paired with Blender and Critter and all of these other cool open source software, you can now make a really good game for nothing essentially, apart from your time and sort of energy. Um, and that's kind of we mentioned about Unity chasing Unreal, but then if they start to do that, they're going to lose that indie audience, and
Yeah.
they're not going to meet Unreal because they've got such a big head start. So then Godot's going to come in and sweep up all of those indies. It's got
Mm,
a sort of nicer sort of scripting language.
mm,
It's getting like better every day. I don't know if it's out yet. I'm not 100% sure, but like I know 4.0, Godot 4.0 is the next kind of big release, and that's bringing quite a lot of big improvements with it. Um, Especially for the 3D sort of stuff. It's quite good for 2D games, but I think they're a bit behind on 3D. So if Unity don't play their cards right, I feel like they're going to get lost. Sort of, they're going to be chasing Unreal and forget about the indies and the community around it that are bringing kind of propping it up and supporting it.
mm.
Um, I mean, they'll
Yeah,
do
good point.
fine. They've obviously got money to burn, but it would be a shame to lose that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting about just the politics around it. Because you're right, you can lose a whole community if you start trying to reach a different target market. One question I have is what's been the hardest tutorial that you've made, and why? What was challenging about it?
Um, I mean, the biggest sort of series, like I've mentioned it a few times now, but the inventory tutorial series, it was 16. It went from an inventory tutorial system, with including saving and loading using JSON, and now it's got a bit of a shop system, kind of bonus content stuck at the end. So that's evolved into quite a big sort of chunk of code. Um, and I was quite good at managing it. I planned out each video. Halfway through, I did a code review and I went back through every single script, like on camera, um, kind of optimized stuff, left notes for what I want to do. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's something I'm quite proud of. it's being well received. It's just now kind of hitting the algorithm. The first video in the series has had a bit of a spike. Um, so I'm excited to see where that goes. I've got some more plans for that as a bit of an ongoing thing. But yeah, that was quite difficult. I've done I think it was three sort of parts to a space simulation type thing with just some flight. Um, it's quite math heavy. I'm not the greatest mathematician, so I need to uh, kind of on my list is to do a code review for that video, and then because there's quite a lot of complaints, not complaints, but people having the same issue. So there's obviously something wrong. So I think I need to go back and either redo that or like fix it in a follow up video.
Yeah.
So that one's haunting me.
This episode of the Zero to Play podcast is brought to you by Prismatic Studios. Prismatic Studios is an Unreal Engine technical consultancy based in Auckland, New Zealand, focusing on development services for clients that need support prototyping, implementing and testing features, or adding development resources to existing projects. With their expertise using Unreal Engine, they can help consult and work alongside your teams to avoid common pitfalls that are so common in software and game development these days. Reach out to them today for a quote or free consultation. A link to their website can be found in the description below. Back to the show.
Are you selling your like the inventory system? Is that something that you're selling as a product on the Unity store or anything?
No, I've not put it on the asset store. The way that my kind of monetization strategy for YouTube is I'm doing the videos for free, and then if people want the source code, they can get it for $2.50. I think it's the cheapest tier on Patreon.
Mm.
I know some people will give the source code away for free, but it's a lot of time to make these videos, and everyone's circumstances are different. So that's why I put it sort of on a cheap tier. Um, so I think instead of selling it as an asset, people can just download it from Patreon for $2.50. And then if they watch the series as well, they'll be able to just make it for free themselves. Because it's all line by line. If they don't have to pay me, if they follow it line by line and go back through videos if anything's wrong, and I'll help them debug it. But
Yeah.
the easy option, obviously, is to support me on Patreon, and it seems to be working so far for me. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's still early days. I'm just about to hit 4,000 subscribers, so it's not massive money by any means.
Yeah. But that's cool. I mean, you're in the flow, of the YouTube game, and I think that once you take it seriously, that's when things start happening, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I've just realized there's a huge contrast between the background of your video and the background of mine. Mine's almost empty, and yours is very, very full. It's really interesting.
That's again. I work from home. I spend all my time in here, so I've invested quite a bit of money in stuff
Yeah,
just to make it just a nice environment to be in when I'm in the same four walls all day.
I love it. I love all the colors. Yeah, it looks really homely and great.
Yeah, I've just
Um,
got some smart bulbs, so I'm just
oh,
showing them
nice.
off.
Do you? So you mentioned the open world factory game earlier. Do you have any ideas for kind of tutorials, or have you kind of split up that work of how you're going to attack it and what kind of value you're going to provide to your community that you can talk about?
Um, yeah, I did this more. I had an idea to do a building system tutorial series, so I had the basis for that kind of, and I was going to do that as a series, kind of like just a base building mechanic. But then me and my friend got very, very hooked on Satisfactory. I was like, oh, that'd be a cool like. 'Cause I love that game to play so much. It'd be cool to just try and make a very simplistic. Like when I talk about a game, I literally mean, I've planned it so there's 5 resources, just a few kind of buildings, and I expect like an hour, maybe 2 of playtime to complete it. It's not going to be a big game, and that's the hope. And I'm telling myself that all the way through, so it doesn't go crazy out of scope. Um, but and then I think following that, I'll have this bank of code that's already written, and I'll have been through it, and then that can form the basis of future tutorials. Um, but I've been trying to just get kind of stuff from the community because I'm now, I've got a Discord server which is starting to grow, and people are coming in asking stuff there. People are starting to respond on YouTube if I do a community post. And at the end of the day, they're the ones that are watching the videos, so I'm trying to ask them more. kind of what they want. So the video I did, I put out yesterday, was about making survival mechanics like hunger, thirst, and stamina, and that was directly from a Patreon asking me to do that. And he was really appreciative of that. So that's great. That if it's coming from my community, I know there's an interest in them to watch it. I can spend all day making the greatest tutorial, but if no one cares and it's not something that's interesting to other people, um, I don't think it'd do very well. So.
Yeah, so talk to me a bit about what your process was like after you saw that comment and then actually went into doing it. Like, what was your research like, and even recording it? What does that look like for you?
Um, well, I've done in previous kind of projects. I've done sort of survival mechanics before, so I knew already how they'd work, and it's quite a simple setup when you kind of plot it all out. They're just various meters that drain over time, but it's about how you actually set that up in a sort of good way in code. Um, so what I normally do is I'll get the project, I'll make the project not recording anything, I'll just do it, get it all set up. That gives me chance to debug kind of any issues, and then I'll go back and start a new project, and I'll have on one screen open the project that's already done and the scripts that are already written, and then I'll just so instead of having like a physical script, I've got my actual scripts, and they kind of prompt me. And there's a lot of in and R in and blank silences, and so the actual editing process, it's just me on Premiere Pro going through and just cut, um, and just chopping all of that out. um, but like that one, for example, that was quite a simple one. It took me an hour to record. By the
Wow.
time I cut it down, it was 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And then uploading took ages. But yeah, the actual like kind of process was quite simple. Whereas again, for the inventory tutorial, I had, because it was such a long sort of complex system, then I had to break it up into each episode's about doing a certain thing. So like episode 1 would be about making the code backend and then plugging it all into a UI. That'd have to be a separate video, otherwise it'd just get a
Mm,
bit
mm.
a bit bogged down. Um,
Yeah, that's really interesting. Have you ever given up halfway through trying to, satisfy a solution and you realize that it was too complex? Or actually, I have a follow-up question, but yeah, have you found that something's just too complicated, or for some reason you've stopped kind of pursuing a video that you had an idea to do?
yeah, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I definitely have done that. I'll start making a video on something. If I went through my kind of project folders, I'd probably know. Let's have a look on Unity Hub. I don't know if that'll uh, mess anything up, but so the building tutorial, that was one that I've ended up developing further just for myself. So that was the first person builder one. Um, I really enjoyed Tunic quite recently. So I was trying to
Mm,
figure out how, like in that, it's top down isometric. You go into a room and it'll fade out the room that you've just come from, and it'll be seamless that you'll walk through and the next room will fade in.
mm,
I reached out to the dev on Twitter, and he gave me some advice, but I just couldn't figure it out myself. I got really excited about making that video, but I just it's all shader logic. And shaders are very math heavy, and as previously established,
yeah.
I'm not a mathematician at all. So yeah, that was another failed attempt. But like I said before, each one I kind of learn what my limits are, and it'll give me a sort of it'll help identify the path that I then need to go if I want to pursue it. What do I go and research and kind of look into? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. That's so fascinating just because I'm not a programmer, so it's really interesting getting into the mind of yeah, just someone who thinks like that, and what their process is like. One thing I wanted to ask is I feel like coding can be quite a like vulnerable thing when you're putting together code, whether it's like really messy, or if there's people that you admire that have really clean and concise code. Do you feel vulnerable at all putting your code out there on YouTube for everyone to see and to copy? Do you often find that there's better ways? Because obviously in a lot of cases there's many ways to get to the same solution. How do you kind of navigate that? Do you struggle with doubt often when figuring out how to structure something? Is there is there an emotional component to when you set up your scripts?
I mean, I mentioned it before, but there is imposter syndrome. You kind of, whether it's a programmer or just from a YouTube perspective, you'll see people who've put like 5 videos up on YouTube, and each one's done really well, and it's like, oh, they've hit the algorithm, and they've got. And he's like, oh god, they're so lucky. And it's the same with programming. I'm kind of, because I am self-taught. I'm kind of less protective about it. I don't know the right way to do it. I only know the way that I've taught myself to do it. I've not, um, as long as kind of every project, I've never done such a big, massive project that kind of optimization and performance from a code perspectives really come into it. I'm assuming I'll hit those kind of hurdles with the factory building game. Once there's even a small production line, there's going to be loads of stuff going on conveyor belts and moving around. So like maybe I'll hit it then. But yeah, I'm quite open to getting feedback. When I did my creative writing degree, we always had to like read out our stories or poems or whatever um, in class, and you'd get people that are too shy to read it out. But it's the only getting feedback's the only way you can ever improve. So I'd always be the first one with my hand up, like volunteering to read out, because I could think it's the most amazing thing in the world. But like I said, with the YouTube videos, if other people don't find it interesting, it's obviously not interesting. Um,
Mm,
so, and there's a saying in creative writing: don't be afraid to murder your darlings, and it'd be about cutting stuff. And you could think you've got the killer first line of a book, but it's actually rubbish, and it's just you're so precious of it. Um, and I kind of took that on board through that course, that you can't be precious about stuff. If someone who's more knowledgeable comes along and tells you there's a better way to do it, and then you try it out and it works, then great, you've learned something, your code's got better, and I've got a new video that I can make.
mhm.
With the inventory tutorial, um, there was a there was a specific bug with the sort of save load system, and I had one commenter, and he was like, "Oh, each video." They're like, "Oh, great video, but this, and this was wrong." And then by the fifth video, it was getting a little bit annoying. Like, I'm not going to lie, but um, every time it made the code better, and then I could do a follow up video, or I'd go on to record the next video, and I'd be like, "Oh, just by the way, I had this comment, and I've tried it out, and this has actually fixed the problem. It was a bug I didn't know existed."
Mhm,
And that's helping out the people who are following my videos as
mhm.
well as me. So um, it can, but and again, I'm not at that stage in YouTube where I'm getting bombarded with loads of comments. A lot of the people who do decide to comment are usually quite positive.
Yeah.
I don't think that will stay. Like, I'm not, I do marketing. I work on social media for a living.
Yeah.
I'm not disillusioned about how great YouTube's going to be. It will be a bit awful once you take off, but that kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah, there's a really interesting mindset about people who make content for YouTube, like the kind of YouTube game dev community. And you mentioned it before, where you said in this open factory game you might have to deal with performance and optimizations. And one thing that I found is when game devs are making games for content, those performance and um, just like saving on memory and things like that aren't a thought at all, because they just need to show the game. And I wonder how you feel about that kind of mentality. It's I mean, YouTube, I think's created this very unique environment for indie devs, and I think it makes it really hard for when a YouTube game dev wants to turn their game into an actual product, because there's probably a lot of boring work that isn't necessarily good to record or to make content about, that they just need to do in order to get a game that is finished. What are your thoughts on that, on like creating or doing work that isn't necessarily good content for YouTube for a game?
Well, I mentioned to you sort of privately that I kind of in prep for this, I watched the one that you did with Bargy, and he had a good point where you've got an indie dev who's doing YouTube videos, or you've got a YouTuber who's making indie games, and that's I can't really say it any better than that. That's kind of a great way of looking at it. In that he was mentioning, and it's something I hadn't really thought about, but if you're making a game, you have to throw in all of the art assets up front. Normally, if you were doing that, you'd do that like be the last thing that you do. But it's such a visual medium, and it has to be entertaining. It isn't always, Danny, one of the bigger dev YouTubers, Carlton. It looks like rubbish, really, but it's so memey and funny, and he's got kind of his great editing style. That's less of an issue. But yeah, it's if you start a video series and it does really well, and you've got this kind of great game idea, you can always go back and optimize if you need to. Obviously, the better way to do things would be to optimize as you go. There's obviously the term tech debt. The longer you leave it, the more sort of spaghettified and harder it becomes to fix a problem. So I think people always talk about making a minimum viable product or MVP, or like a prototype, basically. So if you make a game and you think that, I want to actually take this and make it a product, a commercial game, I'd either start a new project and then kind of, work on it aside. And I don't think YouTube and it goes back to what Bargy said with are you an indie dev that's making YouTube content, sort of like Thin Matrix? He's obviously a big game dev and he's doing devlogs, and he's not doing those silly kind of memey games. And they're the ones that do really well. They're the ones that get the millions of views. But you could then sell them to those millions of fans, and they probably would buy them. And you'll probably do really well off it. It depends what you want. Do you want to make something a bit more sort of in depth, or just something that'll be kind of like a viral one hit wonder sort of thing? And there's pros and cons to both of those, and one isn't more noble than the other. It's everything has a price and an audience. So yeah, there's not one answer to that.
Yeah,
I
no,
think I went
totally.
off on a bit of a tangent.
No.
Tangent then,
I think it's a really cool space to talk about, and I think what changes is if you do want to take it more seriously, say you want to hire another programmer or a back end programmer, and you do the front end kind of thing, then I think you need to organize those files, and it probably comes out of necessity, and probably a lot of studios that do care about the organization of their code, it's purely because they need to communicate it to someone else. Whereas when
Yeah,
you're
I
doing
mean,
it solo, you don't need to.
yeah, that's the other thing as well. If you're working in a silo, you don't comment your code. It doesn't really matter as long as you know what it does. It's fine. You can name your variables and your methods like whatever you want, as long as you know what it is. It's bad practice. But as soon as you get another person that you need to share with, source control your code with, yeah, then you need to obviously start taking it a lot more seriously and naming things and decide on a standard. And again, because I'm self-taught, I I don't really know the best sort of coding practices, and from what I have learned, everyone does it differently anyway. There isn't a standard, even though there should be. Each studio will have their own sort of like coding sort of guidelines and style guides that you have to follow. So as soon as you bring one other person on board, that's when you need to start being sort of serious. If they're a programmer, you might have a programmer or an artist, for example. But
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But even then, like naming conventions become really important. But yeah, it all depends on what your mindset is. If you are wanting to bring the project to life, or if you just want to make a video and then move on to the next meme. What was your first YouTube tutorial for like game developers? Do you remember? And why did you decide to do that one? Like, what led you to that?
For 3D, it was the donut tutorial by Andrew Price, Blender Guru. I think that's everyone. It's a rite of passage. When I got more into it, I found Grant Abbott was really good for 3D. He was a lot more beginner friendly, and it's a lot more structured, a lot longer than just making a donut. It was actually making like cool assets. So in lockdown, I redid the donut tutorial, and I went straight onto Grant Abbott. So that was learning the 3D side of stuff. And that's why I do 3D games as opposed to 2D games, because I've just got more of an interest in sort of Blender, and I think it's easier to make a low poly 3D model than it is to get a readable sprite. And And then in terms of coding, Sebastian Lage was kind of one of the first ones I followed. He had like a procedural world, and that kind of goes back to the, I wanted to make the next Minecraft. So you find that, and it starts off really well, and then he starts to go on about multi-threading code, and it's, nah, can't do that. Brackies was another good resource. Him and Sebastian Lage collabed on a like RPG course with Sebastian doing the Blender side of stuff for that. But I found the kind of the best programming course was a Udemy course from Game Dev TV. They've got like the complete guide to Unity, like C# programming in Unity. And that's really well structured. The videos are very small. It's a bit more of a syllabus. It's a lot better thought out than a YouTube series can be, because people are paying for it. They can put more effort and time and money into the actual production of that. So that was really great for learning the programming. I think I own pretty much every Game Dev TV course. I'm a bit of an evangelist for them, just because they've helped me out so much kind of on this kind of path.
I've seen that you've promoted their courses in your videos. Is that like a proper sponsorship, or is that just like an affiliate link?
That's just an affiliate sort of style thing. Rick, the kind of I'm not sure of his actual role. I think he's the kind of head of Game Dev TV. I've had a few chats with him. He's based out in Australia, so it was always good chatting to people on that side of the world. Yeah, and there was talk about doing maybe a course with him or something, just kind of workshop some stuff. But yeah, they hooked me up with their sort of affiliate scheme.
Cool.
And if anyone is interested in doing YouTube, you don't earn any money on YouTube really. It's all affiliate links. It's kind of the better way of making money. So it's quite important to kind of build those relationships. The Uni Asset Store is a really good one for affiliate payouts as well.
Yeah, I think I misworded my question earlier, but I'm really glad you took it that way. I was meant to ask what was the first video that you created on your channel, and why you created that. But I mean, you gave some really great resources and value, so that was awesome. Thanks for doing that. But yeah, do you remember what your first one was? So I feel like this started when lockdown kind of happened. Do you know what that first kind of tutorial was that you felt you could provide value to an audience?
Yeah, I started off actually doing Blender tutorials as opposed to game dev stuff, because I learned the 3D side of things first. I wasn't really thinking about trying to get back into game dev. I was learning Blender to do motion graphics, because that ties into my my marketing stuff. Because obviously, one of the companies that I worked for previously, we had to do sort of 3D mock-ups of stuff, so it kind of helped for that. And then when I started that job after lockdown and the furlough scheme, that really came in handy. That's why I got that job, because I'd been doing that. So I actually started doing Blender tutorials first. And I can't remember if it was the first one, but one of the ones that I was quite happy with was how to make the sun, kind of like an Elite Dangerous style sun in Blender. And I really liked that video, and it did quite well eventually. All my videos seem to get 100 views, don't do anything, and then the algorithm in about 6 months is like, maybe people want to watch this now, and then they'll boost it. It's really hard to tell. But first Unity tutorial I did, I can't fully remember. It might have been the spaceship one, possibly. Oh no, I did a local co-op multiplayer style thing using the new input system. That was like the first big series I did.
Oh,
and then I did the spaceship thing, which was a 3-part, and then onto the inventory tutorial.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's really great. I have kind of 3 rapid fire questions that I want to ask in order to close off the podcast. But first, I just want to say a big thank you for your time and coming on, sharing your insights and your journey. I think that's really exciting, and a lot of people want to kind of make a career through YouTube or pursue game dev and teach as they're learning, which I think you're doing a really awesome job of. Thanks for your time. And if anyone's interested in following, you can find Daniel on Twitter at Dan Pos _ or YouTube at Dan Pos. It's DANPOS. And I'll also link to the Patreon and Discord below if you want to connect with him that way. $2.50 is all you need in order to get the source code.
All my code.
Yeah. And yeah, so just to wrap it up, if you could give one piece of advice for someone wanting to create YouTube game dev tutorials, what would you say to them?
Just start doing it. Make a channel, start posting it. You can always delete something if you find it embarrassing, kind of in a few kind of months' time or years' time or whatever. But the only way to do it is to do it. So just stop thinking about it and actually do it. That's kind of my takeaway from that.
Yeah, I love it. If if you could go speak to yourself before you started your game design course and then switching over to creative writing, what advice would you give that version of you?
I'd tell him to stop doing game design and go join the creative writing course, because that set me on my kind of career path. Through that, I met my wife to be. We've got our big dreams of moving to New Zealand. If I'd have done that game design course, I'd have met someone else. My life would have gone a different route, but I kind of like my life as it is now. So yeah, I don't. I try not to live in regret. It's kind of, I always just look forward to kind of how I can better myself and move forward. So
Yeah. I
it's
I
worked out quite
actually
well.
I really like how you mentioned that kill your darlings, which is a very common quote in like storytelling and screenwriting and creative writing, and you use that for a programming question, and I think that's a really cool just thing that I realized is that you have actually taken, like, you have learned a lot from that course and from your kind of career in marketing and applied that to program, which is quite unique and cool.
Yeah, I mean, you can take it to be literal just about writing, or you can have it as a bit of a philosophy.
Yeah.
And until I said that out loud, I didn't know that was my philosophy, but it kind of, yeah, maybe I'll have to get a new tattoo with that.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's
Um,
quite good.
yeah, awesome. And the last question is, if you had to give a one piece of advice to anyone wanting to pursue marketing in games, what would you say to them?
Um, I guess firstly, you need a bit of a social media presence. I know some people hate social media. Maybe less so people who are trying to get into it. They're probably already on social media. But um, if you don't have any marketing experience, it's like anything. If you don't have any sort of experience, it's hard to then get that experience in the first place. So you don't have to be hired as a marketing person to get experience marketing. If you start a YouTube channel, or you have an Instagram and you're crafting really good posts, that then builds a portfolio which you can then show to a marketing assistant, sort of entry level role. Um, and do networking. LinkedIn's great. You can kind of find people in your sort of similar area or companies you want to work for and just sneakily add them and then try and chat to them. Um, Discord and Slack, great communities. But yeah, if you don't have a portfolio or any experience marketing, you're not going to get a job as a marketing person, unfortunately. So the easiest way to do that is to start writing copy for websites, start a personal blog, start a social media account. Yeah, kind of just get on it that way.
Awesome. All right. Thanks you. Yeah. Thank you, Daniel, for your advice and your time today. And yeah, wish you all the best. Have a good night.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks. You too.
See ya. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. We hope you learned something about game development, the games industry as a whole, or the future of games. Follow us on Twitter at Zero to Play and let us know what you found valuable. Take care and see you in the next episode.